I'm Amber, 32, and until last month, my life was perfectly under control. I had a marketing job I loved, a small Boston apartment I'd saved years for, and clear boundaries with my controlling parents. Then came that Sunday dinner when my mother casually announced, "Your sister Madison will live in your apartment." I sat there, fork suspended midair, while they discussed my life without asking my opinion. Little did they know I had no intention of complying. Before I tell you how I handled my family's presumptuous decision, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had someone make decisions about your life without asking. My apartment isn't much by most standards, just 600 square feet with one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that barely fits my second-hand sofa. But it took me 5 years of saving, working overtime, and eating ramen more often than I'd like to admit to afford the down payment. Every inch of that space represents my independence, my choices, my life on my terms. I've always been the responsible one in my family. While most kids got praise for good grades, my parents Eleanor and Richard simply expected perfection. When I landed my first marketing job after college, my father's response was, "At least someone in this family has common sense." That someone comment was a direct jab at my younger sister Madison. Madison is 25 going on 16 when it comes to responsibility. She's dropped out of college twice, first from her communications program at Boston University, too much pressure. And then from the community college program my parents enrolled her in, not challenging enough. She cycled through retail jobs, barista positions, and administrative roles, never lasting more than a few months before some drama ensued. I've lost count of how many times she's needed just a small loan to cover rent or called at midnight needing a ride because she fought with a roommate. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister. When she's not in crisis mode, Madison is creative, funny, and has a genuine warmth that draws people to her. But she spent her entire adult life being rescued by our parents, and it's created a pattern that benefits nobody, least of all her. My parents have always handled us differently. When I needed help with college applications, my father handed me a guidebook and said, "Figure it out." When Madison needed the same help 3 years later, they hired a private counselor and drove her to campus tours across 6 states. When I wanted to study abroad, I worked 2 jobs to save up. When Madison mentioned interest in a semester in Italy, they covered it entirely, a trip she ended up cutting short after 3 weeks because she was homesick. This dynamic has created exactly what you'd expect. I learned to be self-sufficient, sometimes to a fault, while Madison never had to develop those skills. And my parents continue enabling her while simultaneously resenting her dependence. Sunday family dinners have been a non-negotiable tradition in our family since I moved out. Even during the pandemic, we maintained the ritual over Zoom. That particular Sunday seemed ordinary at first. Mom had prepared her specialty lasagna, Dad was discussing a problem client at his law firm, and Madison was scrolling through her phone under the table, occasionally adding a distracted to the conversation. I was midway through explaining a challenging marketing campaign I'd just completed when my mother interrupted. "So, Madison has some news," she announced, placing her hand on my sister's arm. Madison looked up from her phone, seemingly as surprised by the statement as I was. Yeah," Madison stammered, glancing at our mother with confusion. "Madison will be moving back to Boston next week," my mother continued, not waiting for my sister to speak. "She's decided that Portland isn't the right fit after all." This was the first I'd heard about Portland not working out. Madison had moved there just 3 months ago for what she described as her dream job at a boutique PR firm. I'd helped her prepare for the interview and had been genuinely happy when she got it. It seemed like she might finally find her footing. "What happened with the job?" I asked Madison directly. She opened her mouth to respond, but my father cut in. The company wasn't what they represented themselves to be. Poor management, unreasonable expectations. I noticed how Madison's gaze dropped to her plate. There was more to this story, but I knew from experience that I wouldn't get the real version with our parents present. Anyway, my mother continued brightly, "It's all worked out for the best. Madison will be living with you while she finds her next opportunity here in Boston." The statement landed like a brick on the table. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "Excuse me, your sister will live in your apartment," my mother repeated, as if announcing nothing more significant than the weather forecast. "Just temporarily, of course. Your place is in such a nice neighborhood for job hunting. And you have that extra space since you live alone," my father added, helping himself to more salad. I looked at Madison, who was studying her fingernails intently. "Did you agree to this?" I asked her. Before she could answer, my mother jumped in. "It makes perfect sense. You're always saying we should encourage Madison's independence, and this way she'll have her own space, but with some support from you. You'll be a good influence. Plus, you can split the bills," my father added, as if offering a tremendous benefit to me. "It's already decided. We'll help move her things next Saturday." I sat there, fork suspended midair, processing what was happening. They weren't asking if Madison could move in with me. They were informing me that it was happening, with the clear expectation that I would comply without question. Just like I always had. In that moment, I made a decision. I carefully placed my fork down, took a sip of water, and said, "I see." My mother, perhaps sensing my hesitation, quickly added, "It's only temporary, dear. Just until Madison finds her feet." If I'd learned anything from my family's dynamics, it was that temporary arrangements with Madison had a way of becoming permanent. The last temporary situation had been when she moved back home after her first college dropout that had lasted nearly 2 years. As the conversation moved on to the logistics of the move, what furniture Madison would need, how they'd get her belongings from Portland, what job leads they already had for her, I remained mostly silent, offering only non-committal sounds of acknowledgement when directly addressed. Inside, though, my mind was racing. I knew from past experience that direct confrontation wouldn't work. I'd tried rational discussion with my parents countless times over the years, and they always had a way of dismissing my concerns or making me feel selfish for having boundaries. If I explicitly refused, they'd wear me down with guilt, emotional manipulation, and sheer persistence until I gave in or until our relationship fractured beyond repair. I needed a different approach entirely. The drive home from my parents' house that evening felt longer than its usual 20 minutes. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel as I rehearsed and rejected one potential response after another. I could call and firmly refuse. I could send a polite but clear email explaining why this wouldn't work. I could invite them all for coffee and present my case rationally. But experience had taught me that none of these approaches would succeed. My parents operated with a simple philosophy: they knew best. End of discussion. Any attempt to assert my own preferences would be labeled as selfishness or, their favorite accusation, not being a team player in this family. As soon as I got home, I called Jessica. We'd been best friends since college, and she'd witnessed the family dynamic firsthand enough times to understand the nuances of my situation. "They did what?" Jessica's voice rose in incredulous outrage after I explained the situation. "Without even asking you first? That's insane, Amber." "Welcome to my family," I sighed, kicking off my shoes and sinking into my sofa, the same sofa that apparently would soon be Madison's bed according to my parents' plans. "Just tell them no," Jessica said firmly. "It's your apartment. You pay the mortgage. They can't force an adult to live with you." "You don't understand how they operate," I replied. "If I directly refuse, they'll launch a full-scale emotional warfare campaign. My mother will cry about family loyalty. My father will give lectures about how much they've sacrificed for us. They'll enlist relatives to call and tell me what a terrible sister I am. They'll show up at my door with Madison and her stuff, creating a scene in front of my neighbors until I give in just to end the public spectacle." "That's remarkably toxic," Jessica said after a pause. And the worst part is, it won't even help Madison in the long run. She needs to learn to stand on her own feet, not be shuffled from one safety net to another. We talked in circles for nearly an hour, weighing options and scenarios. It was when Jessica jokingly suggested I should move out of my own apartment that something clicked. Wait, I said slowly. What if my apartment genuinely wasn't available? Not because I refused, but because it physically couldn't accommodate Madison. Like if you suddenly had a roommate already? Jessica caught on quickly. Exactly. My mind raced ahead. My parents never respect my choices, but they do respond to external circumstances they can't control. As if the universe was aligning with my plan, I remembered a conversation from Friday's office happy hour. Trevor, a graphic designer from the creative department, had mentioned that his apartment building had suffered water damage from a burst pipe. He'd been staying with various friends while looking for a new place, but the rental market in Boston was brutal. I think I know someone who needs a place to stay, I told Jessica, the outline of a plan forming in my mind. The next morning, I caught Trevor in the office kitchen. Hey, are you still looking for a temporary place? I asked casually while waiting for the coffee to brew. Trevor's face lit up. Desperately. My friend's couch is killing my back, and I've got another week before insurance pays out for a hotel. I took a deep breath. I might have a solution. It's a bit unconventional, but what if you sublet my place for 3 weeks? His eyebrows shot up. Your place? Where would you stay? With Jessica, I explained. She's got a spare bedroom she's been trying to convince me to use for a girls' month anyway. I laid out my situation briefly, and to my relief, Trevor not only understood but seemed amused by the creative solution. So, basically, you need me to be the physical embodiment of sorry, position filled, when your family shows up, he clarified. Exactly. I'd draw up a proper sublease to make it official. You'd pay reduced rent since it's helping me out, and I'd move my valuables and personal items to Jessica's. You'd have the place to yourself for 3 weeks, by which time my parents will have had to find another solution for my sister. Trevor considered it for a moment. I'm in. This is way better than another friend's couch, and frankly, I love a good boundary-setting scheme. That afternoon, I contacted a lawyer friend who helped me draft a short-term sublease agreement. Everything was legal and binding. Trevor would officially be my tenant for 3 weeks, with all the rights that entailed. This wasn't just a bluff, it was a legitimate arrangement that benefited us both. Over the next few days, I carefully packed essential items and personal valuables, moving them to Jessica's guest room. I left my furniture and kitchen supplies for Trevor's use, and made sure he had keys, building access codes, and information about mail delivery and parking regulations. What if they don't believe me? Trevor asked as I showed him how to work the temperamental dishwasher the day before he moved in. The sublease is real, I reminded him. Show them if you need to. You're not lying. You legally live here for the next 3 weeks. And if they try to push past me or something, then you call building security, I said firmly. My parents can be pushy, but they're not going to physically assault someone or break the law. They just count on emotional manipulation to get their way. As I did a final walkthrough of my apartment, I felt a twinge of guilt. Was this too extreme? Should I have tried one more time to reason with my parents? But then I remembered all the times my clearly stated boundaries had been ignored, all the times no had been treated as the opening position in a negotiation rather than a complete sentence. Sometimes the only way to be heard is to create a situation where the other person has no choice but to listen. You're sure about this? Jessica asked as she helped me unpack my clothes into her guest room closet. It's not too late to call them and just have a direct conversation. I folded a sweater with more force than necessary. I've had direct conversations with them for years. They listen, they nod, they say they understand, and then they do exactly what they want anyway. This is the only way they'll get the message. The truth was, I felt both tremendous anxiety and a strange sense of liberation about my plan. For once, I wouldn't be accommodating everyone else at my own expense. For once, my parents would face a consequence for making decisions about my life without consulting me. Meanwhile, Trevor had settled into my apartment comfortably. He texted me a photo of the place with a thumbs up and a message, "Operation Boundary is a go. Place is great, thanks again for the rescue." Madison had been texting me throughout the week with increasing frequency. "Mom says I'll be staying with you for a bit. Thanks, sis. Red heart. Do you think I should bring my winter clothes too, or keep some in storage? Can I bring my essential oil diffuser, or are you still sensitive to lavender? Mom wants to know if we should arrive at 10 or 11 on Saturday." I responded vaguely to each message, never confirming the arrangement, but not explicitly denying it either. "We should talk about this soon. Not sure what's best for your things. Let me get back to you on timing." My parents were even more presumptuous. My mother called on Wednesday to inform me they'd rented a small moving truck for Saturday morning. "We should be at your place around 11, traffic permitting," she said briskly. "Your father's back has been acting up, so we'll need help with the heavier boxes." "Mom, we really need to discuss this arrangement first," I tried. "What's there to discuss? It's all arranged. Madison is so excited about your girls' time together. I've told her this is her opportunity to learn from your work ethic." When I didn't immediately agree, she added, "This is what family does, Amber. We help each other. Remember how we supported you through college? The fact that I'd worked 30 hours a week while maintaining a full course load, taking out student loans for the remainder, loans I was still paying off, apparently didn't factor into her recollection. By Friday evening, my anxiety had reached a fever pitch. Trevor and I had a final strategy call to confirm the plan. "They'll arrive around 11 tomorrow," I told him. "I've set up the video doorbell app on my phone so Jessica and I can watch remotely. Should I record it?" Trevor asked, sounding both nervous and excited. "No, that might escalate things legally. Just stick to the script. You live here now, you have a legal sublease, and they need to take their concerns up with me directly." "Got it. And if they don't leave?" "They will," I assured him, though my stomach knotted at the thought of the scene that might unfold. "But if they refuse, call building security and then text me." I barely slept that night, my mind cycling through worst-case scenarios. Would this permanently damage my relationship with my family? Was I being too extreme? But then I'd remember my mother's dismissive tone when announcing Madison would live with me, my father's assumption that I'd just comply without question, and my resolve would strengthen again. This wasn't just about avoiding an unwanted roommate. This was about finally establishing that I was an adult with the right to make decisions about my own life and living space. Morning came too quickly. Jessica made coffee while I anxiously checked the doorbell app every few minutes, though it was still 2 hours before my family was due to arrive. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," Jessica said, handing me a mug. "This is long overdue." We decided to watch the confrontation from a coffee shop a few blocks from my apartment. I couldn't bear to be too close, but I also couldn't stand being completely removed from the situation. At 10:48 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from the doorbell app. They were early. Jessica and I huddled over my phone, watching the doorbell camera footage with a strange mix of dread and anticipation. The image showed my parents' SUV pulling into a visitor spot in front of my building. My father emerged first, surveying the area with the confident air of someone who expects the world to arrange itself according to his plans. My mother exited next, already issuing directions as she opened the back door. Finally, Madison stepped out, looking simultaneously excited and uncertain. "Your sister seems nervous," Jessica observed. "She probably senses she's in the middle of something she didn't create," I replied, feeling a pang of sympathy for Madison despite everything. She might be a willing participant in our parents' enabling, but she was also another victim of their controlling nature. We watched as my father opened the vehicle's trunk, revealing a jumble of boxes and suitcases. My mother gestured emphatically towards smaller items, which Madison dutifully began gathering. They clearly expected to make multiple trips based on the amount they'd packed. They really didn't consider the possibility that I might say no, I whispered, almost to myself. That's the whole problem, isn't it? Jessica squeezed my shoulder. On screen, the three of them approached my building's entrance. My father punched in the visitor code I'd given them months ago for emergencies, and they disappeared from view momentarily. The camera feed switched to show them in the elevator, Madison clutching a potted plant that I recognized as one that had previously died in her care and been resurrected by our mother. "Here we go," Jessica murmured as they reached my floor and approached my door. My father, leading the procession, knocked firmly. When there was no immediate answer, he knocked again with more force. The door opened to reveal Trevor, dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt, looking exactly like someone comfortable in their own home. "Can I help you?" he asked politely. The confusion on my father's face was immediate and profound. He checked the apartment number on the door, then consulted his phone as if he might have the wrong address. "We're looking for Amber Mitchell," my mother said, stepping forward. "This is her apartment." Trevor leaned casually against the doorframe. "Amber's not here right now. I'm Trevor. I live here." The silence that followed was so complete I could almost hear it through the phone. Madison's eyes had widened to comic proportions, and she clutched her plant more tightly. "There must be some mistake," my father said, his lawyer voice emerging, the one he used when he expected people to comply simply from the authority in his tone. "This is my daughter's apartment. We're here to move her sister in today." "No mistake, sir," Trevor replied calmly. "I've been subletting from Amber for the past week. I have a 3-week lease." He held up his phone, displaying the digital copy of our agreement. My mother's face flushed red. "That's impossible." She didn't mention anything about a tenant. "I'm sorry to hear that," Trevor said, sounding genuinely sympathetic. "But I do have a legal right to be here. Amber and I signed all the paperwork last week." Madison finally found her voice. "But where am I supposed to go?" She looked genuinely bewildered, and I felt another pang of guilt. "I can't help you with that," Trevor said gently. "You'd need to talk to Amber." My father pulled out his phone. "I'm calling her right now." I had silenced my phone in anticipation of this moment, and the call went straight to voicemail. On screen, I could see his frustration mounting as he jabbed at the screen to try again. "This is ridiculous," my mother declared. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding. Perhaps we could come in and sort this out?" Trevor stood his ground. "I'm afraid I can't allow that. As I mentioned, I'm the legal tenant right now, and I don't feel comfortable having strangers in my home." "We are not strangers," my father said, his voice rising. "We are Amber's parents, and this is a family matter." "Nevertheless," Trevor replied, "I have rights as a tenant. I sympathize with your situation, but I need to ask you to leave. If you want to contact Amber, I suggest you try her phone or email." My mother's expression shifted from confusion to anger. "Young man, I don't know what Amber has told you or what kind of arrangement you think you have, but this is completely unacceptable. We've driven all this way with Madison's belongings, and we expect to resolve this immediately." Trevor remained remarkably calm. "I understand you're upset, but as I said, I have a legal sublease." He held up his phone again, scrolling through the document. "It's all properly signed and dated. I'm living here legally for the next 3 weeks." "This is absurd," my father snapped. He turned to my mother and Madison. "Wait here." Then, addressing Trevor, "I'm going to call the building manager." "Feel free," Trevor replied. "They have a copy of the sublease on file." This was true. I had submitted the paperwork to the management office as required by my lease terms. My father stalked off toward the elevator, his body language radiating fury. My mother remained at the door, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't know what game Amber is playing," she said to Trevor, "but this is extremely disappointing behavior. Madison needs a place to stay." Trevor's response was measured. "I really am sorry about the confusion. But I signed this lease in good faith, and I have nowhere else to go right now." My own apartment had water damage. Madison, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly looked directly into the doorbell camera as if she sensed she was being watched. A flash of realization crossed her face. "Mom," she said quietly, "I think we should go." "Absolutely not," my mother replied. "We're waiting for your father to sort this out." Madison shook her head. "This isn't a mistake. Amber did this on purpose." My mother turned to her, startled. "What are you talking about?" "She never agreed to me moving in," Madison said, her voice stronger now. "You and Dad just announced it at dinner, and she barely said anything. Did you ever actually ask her if it was okay?" The question hung in the air between them. My mother's expression flickered briefly with uncertainty before hardening again. "That's beside the point. Family helps family. She has the space, and you need it. It's that simple." My father returned a few minutes later, his face thunderous. "The office confirmed there's a registered sublease. For 3 weeks." He glared at Trevor. "This is a deliberate attempt to avoid family responsibility." Trevor remained neutral. "I really can't speak to any family matters. I just know I have a legal right to be here." "We'll see about that," my father said ominously. "I'm an attorney, young man. I can find issues with that sublease." "Dad," Madison interrupted, her voice surprisingly firm. "Let's just go." All three of them looked at her in surprise. "This is humiliating," she continued. "Standing here arguing in the hallway? Amber obviously doesn't want me to stay with her, and forcing it isn't going to work." My mother reached for her arm. "Sweetheart, this isn't about what Amber wants. It's about what you need right now." Madison stepped back, shaking her head. "No, it's about what you and Dad decided without asking either of us." "I'm going back to the car." She turned and walked toward the elevator, still clutching her plant. After a moment of stunned silence, my parents followed, my mother throwing one last glare at Trevor and the apartment door. As they disappeared from view, Jessica and I sat back in our coffee shop chairs, almost in shock at what we'd just witnessed. "Did that actually work?" I whispered. "I think it did," Jessica replied, equally stunned. "But I have a feeling this is just round one." My phone immediately began buzzing with text notifications and calls, which I continued to ignore. This confrontation was over, but the real reckoning was still to come. The aftermath was immediate and intense. Within minutes of my family leaving my apartment building, my phone exploded with notifications. "Mom, 11:32 a.m., call me immediately. This behavior is completely unacceptable." "Dad, 11:33 a.m., whatever game you're playing needs to stop now. Your sister is in tears." "Madison, 11:35 a.m., I get that you didn't want me there, but this is so embarrassing. Did you have to humiliate me?" The messages continued to pour in, increasing in both frequency and emotional intensity. My father's texts became increasingly threatening. "Dad, 11:47 a.m. If you don't call back within the hour, there will be serious consequences." "Dad, 12:15 p.m. I've always respected your independence, but this crosses a line. This is not how we raised you to treat family." "Dad, 12:38 p.m. You leave me no choice but to reconsider our relationship if this is how you choose to behave." My mother's approach was more emotionally manipulative. "Mom, 12:05 p.m. I'm devastated that you would go to such lengths to avoid helping your own sister. What did we do to deserve this cruelty?" "Mom, 12:23 p.m. Madison is beside herself. She had nowhere to go and now all her things are packed with nowhere to unload them." "Mom, 12:41 p.m. Your grandmother would be so disappointed in you right now." Madison's messages, interestingly, evolved over the course of the day. "Madison, 12:10 p.m. Thanks for making me homeless. Real sisterly of you." "Madison, 1:32 p.m. Mom and Dad are furious. They're saying all kinds of stuff about cutting you off." "Madison, 2:45 p.m. Look, I get you didn't want me there, but couldn't you have just said so?" This is so much drama. I read every message, but responded to none, following the advice Jessica and I had agreed upon. Maintain radio silence for at least 24 hours to let the initial emotional reaction settle. By evening, the situation had escalated beyond my immediate family. My phone showed missed calls from Aunt Barbara, Uncle Paul, and even my cousin Stephanie, with whom I normally only exchanged birthday texts. The family phone tree had clearly been activated. I listened to one voicemail from Aunt Barbara, my mother's sister. "Amber, this is your Aunt Barbara. I've just heard what happened today, and I have to say I'm shocked. Family is everything, and turning your back on Madison in her time of need is not how you were raised. Your mother is absolutely beside herself. I strongly suggest you call her and apologize before this gets any worse." What struck me was how one-sided the narrative had become. In their version, I had cruelly abandoned Madison to homelessness, rather than simply maintaining my right to decide who lived in my own home. Trevor texted me that evening. "All quiet here now. Your dad called the building manager again to question the legitimacy of the sublease, but obviously that went nowhere. Want me to keep you posted if they come back?" "Please do," I replied. "And, Trevor, thank you. I know this put you in an awkward position." "Are you kidding? This is the most interesting thing that's happened to me all year. Plus, your apartment is way nicer than my friend's couch." "We're good." Jessica and I spent that evening strategizing my next moves. I decided to send one brief text to Madison, since she seemed to be the only one showing any self-reflection. "Madison, I'm sorry you were caught in the middle of this. I never agreed to you moving in, and Mom and Dad never asked me if it was okay. I'll call you tomorrow to talk. In the meantime, do you have a safe place to stay?" Her response came quickly. "I'm at Emma's place. She said I can crash for a few days." Emma was one of Madison's more stable friends, which reassured me. At least she wasn't truly without options, despite my parents' dramatic claims of homelessness. The next morning, I awoke to a text from Trevor that sent a chill through me. "FYI, your parents just showed up at the apartment again." I didn't answer the door, but they left a legal-looking letter taped to it. "Want me to send you a pic?" The legal-looking letter turned out to be a document my father had drafted on his law firm letterhead, questioning the validity of the sublease based on some obscure clause in my original lease agreement. It was intimidating but ultimately toothless. I had checked with my own lawyer friend before executing the sublease. What truly shocked me, though, was what happened later that day. I had gone into the office, deciding that work would be the best distraction from the family drama. Around 2 p.m., my assistant popped her head into my office. "Amber, there are some people in the lobby asking for you. They say they're your parents?" Security called up because they seemed pretty insistent. My heart sank. They had tracked me down at work. This was a new level of boundary violation, even for them. "Tell security I'll be right down," I said, taking a deep breath to center myself. In the elevator, I decided on my approach. This confrontation was inevitable, and perhaps it was better to have it in a public place where emotional outbursts would be constrained. My parents were standing stiffly in the lobby, my father checking his watch impatiently while my mother surveyed the modern office decor with disapproval. They spotted me as soon as I stepped off the elevator. Finally, my father said, as if I'd kept them waiting for hours rather than minutes, "We need to talk." "Not here," I replied quietly. "This is my workplace." "You've left us no choice," my mother hissed. "You won't answer our calls or texts. What do you expect us to do?" I gestured toward the small visitor lounge off the main lobby. "We can talk there for 5 minutes. That's all the time I can spare during work hours." Once seated in the lounge, my father immediately launched into his prepared speech. "What you did yesterday was childish, irresponsible, and cruel. Madison needed your help, and you deliberately arranged this sublease to avoid family responsibility. I've reviewed your lease agreement, and I have serious questions about whether you're even permitted to sublet without written permission from the management company." "I have that permission," I replied calmly. "It's all properly documented." My mother leaned forward. "That's hardly the point, Amber. The point is that your sister needed you, and you chose to be selfish. The point, I countered, finally finding my voice, is that you made a unilateral decision about my home without asking me. You announced Madison would be moving in with me as if I had no say in the matter. That's not acceptable. We're your parents, my father said, as if that explained everything. I'm 32 years old, I replied. I have my own home that I pay for. I make my own decisions about who lives there. If you had asked me about Madison staying with me, we could have had a conversation. But you didn't ask. You told. This isn't about some petty power struggle, my mother said dismissively. This is about helping your sister when she needs it. And what about what I need? I asked. Has that even crossed your mind? My apartment is 600 square feet. It's barely big enough for one person, let alone two. I work from home 3 days a week and need my space. I have routines and systems that work for me. None of that mattered to you. Family makes sacrifices, my father stated flatly. Yes, family does make sacrifices, I agreed. But family also respects boundaries. Family asks rather than demands. Family treats adult members as equals, not as children to be directed. My mother's eyes filled with tears, a tactic I'd seen countless times when rational arguments weren't working. I never thought I'd see the day when my own daughter would turn her back on her family. I refuse to be swayed. I haven't turned my back on anyone. I've simply established a boundary about my own living space. Madison has other options. She's staying with Emma right now. And if she truly needs a place to stay long-term, you have that big 4-bedroom house with plenty of room. She needs independence, my father insisted. No, she needs to learn actual independence, not just be shuffled from one dependent situation to another, I countered. And I'm not going to enable the pattern by letting you volunteer my home without my consent. The conversation circled back on itself several more times, with my parents alternating between guilt trips, appeals to family loyalty, and veiled threats about reconsidering financial arrangements, though I hadn't received or asked for financial support from them since college. Finally, I stood up. My 5 minutes are up. I need to get back to work. I understand you're upset, but my decision is final. Trevor has a legal sublease for the next 3 weeks. After that, we can discuss if there are ways I can help Madison that don't involve her moving into my apartment. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This isn't over, Amber. Not by a long shot. I'm sure it isn't, I replied wearily. But for now, please don't show up at my workplace again. It's unprofessional and puts me in a difficult position with my colleagues and supervisors. As I walked back toward the elevators, I heard my mother call after me, "We only wanted what was best for both of you." That phrase, "what was best," had been the justification for so many unwanted interventions in my life. As the elevator doors closed, I wondered if they would ever understand that they didn't get to decide what was best for me anymore. Later that evening, I finally called Madison. To my surprise, she answered on the first ring. "So that was quite a show you arranged," she said, but there was less anger in her voice than I'd expected. "I'm sorry you were caught in the middle," I told her sincerely. "But Mom and Dad gave me no choice. They announced you were moving in without ever asking me." There was a long pause before Madison responded. "Yeah, I've been thinking about that. They didn't actually ask me either, not really. They just told me it was all arranged and I'd be staying with you." This surprised me. "Wait, you didn't ask to stay with me?" "No," Madison admitted. "I mean, I mentioned I was having issues in Portland and thinking about coming back to Boston, and the next thing I knew, Mom was telling me I'd be living with you, and it was all settled." We were both silent as the implications of this sank in. Our parents had made decisions for both of us, assuming compliance from both sides. "So where does this leave us?" I finally asked. Madison sighed. "I don't know. Emma says I can stay here for a couple weeks, but I can't crash forever. Mom and Dad want me to come home, but that hasn't worked out well in the past," I finished for her. "Exactly," she agreed. "Every time I live with them, I end up feeling like I'm 16 again. I can't breathe." For the first time in years, I felt like my sister and I were actually having an honest conversation. The artificial division our parents had created between us, the responsible one versus the one who needed saving, seemed less pronounced. "Let me help you find other options," I offered. "Not my apartment, but I can help you look for affordable places, or maybe find roommates who are actually compatible with you." "You'd do that? Even after I called you selfish and said you made me homeless." "You were upset," I said. "And honestly, I probably could have handled this better. But Madison, we both need to start standing up to Mom and Dad or this pattern will never end." "Easier said than done," she muttered, but I could hear a new resolve in her voice. "But maybe it's time." As we ended the call, I felt cautiously hopeful. The situation with my parents was far from resolved, but perhaps Madison and I had found a new understanding. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, I felt like we might be walking it side by side rather than on opposite paths. The week that followed was tense but productive. My parents continued their campaign of emotional manipulation through calls, texts, and even enlisted extended family members, but I maintained my boundary while keeping lines of communication open. Madison and I spoke daily, developing a relationship independent of our parents for perhaps the first time in our adult lives. "Emma's boyfriend is getting annoyed that I'm always here," Madison confessed during one of our calls. "I need to figure out something more permanent." I had been researching options and had compiled a list of potential apartments and roommate situations. "I found 3 places that might work with your budget," I told her. "And my colleague Diane mentioned her roommate is moving out next month. Her place is in Cambridge, close to the Red Line." "You're doing more to help me find a place than Mom and Dad," Madison noted with a hint of surprise. "They just keep saying I should come home until the situation with Amber is resolved." "Because they're not actually trying to help you be independent," I pointed out. "They're trying to maintain control of both of us." By Friday, 10 days after the initial confrontation, Madison had lined up 3 apartment viewings and was considering the roommate option with Diane. She sounded more energized and focused than I'd heard her in years. "I had a job interview too," she told me. "Nothing fancy, just admin work at a startup, but it's something." "That's great, Madison," I said, genuinely proud of her initiative. "I also told Mom and Dad I'm not moving home," she added, her voice smaller. "It didn't go well." "I can imagine," I replied, thinking of my own ongoing Cold War with our parents. "What happened?" "Dad said I was being influenced by your rebellion and that I'd regret not accepting their help." Mom cried and said she just wanted her family back together. "The usual tactics," I noted. "Yeah, but for the first time, I saw it clearly for what it was: manipulation. It was like, once you stood up to them, it gave me permission to see the patterns too." This revelation was both heartening and sobering. Had my compliance over the years actually enabled not just my parents' behavior, but also Madison's dependency? On Saturday morning, I received a text from my mother that surprised me. "Your father and I would like to meet with you and Madison tomorrow to discuss the situation as a family. Neutral location, the restaurant of your choosing. Please." The "please" caught my attention. It was a small thing, but my parents rarely requested rather than directed. I called Madison immediately. "Did you get a text about a family meeting?" "Yeah," she confirmed. "What do you think? Is it a trap?" I considered this. Maybe, but it might also be progress. They're suggesting a neutral location and asking rather than demanding. "Should we go?" Madison sounded uncertain. After discussing it further, we decided to accept the invitation, but with clear boundaries. We would meet at a public restaurant, we would arrive separately from our parents, and we would both be prepared to leave if the conversation became manipulative or unproductive. I selected Rossetti's, an Italian restaurant with enough ambient noise for privacy, but public enough to discourage dramatic scenes. I made a reservation for Sunday at 1 p.m. and confirmed with my parents. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept rehearsing what I wanted to say, anticipating their counterarguments, and preparing myself for potential emotional manipulation. Jessica helped me practice firm but respectful responses to likely scenarios. Remember, she coached, you're not asking for permission to have boundaries. You're informing them of boundaries that already exist. Sunday arrived with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Madison and I met for coffee beforehand to align our approaches. I'm nervous, she admitted, fidgeting with her cup. I always end up agreeing with them in the moment, even when I don't want to. We'll support each other, I promised. If you feel yourself getting swayed, just look at me. We can even have a code word if you need a rescue. She smiled weakly. How about hippopotamus? Hard to slip that naturally into conversation. Hippopotamus it is, I agreed, grateful for the moment of levity. We arrived at Rossetti's 5 minutes early to find our parents already seated at a corner table. My mother had dressed formally, as if for church, while my father wore what I recognized as his important client meeting tie. They were taking this seriously. Amber, Madison, my father acknowledged as we sat down. Thank you for coming. The formality was unusual and put me on alert immediately. My mother reached across the table as if to take my hand, but I pretended not to notice, picking up the menu instead. Should we order first? I suggested, needing a moment to settle my nerves. The initial small talk was strained, but civil as we ordered drinks and appetizers. Once the waiter had left, my father cleared his throat. We've asked you here because this family situation has gotten out of hand, he began. The last 2 weeks have been difficult for everyone, and we need to find a path forward. My mother nodded. We miss our Sunday dinners. We miss our family being together. I waited, curious if there would be any acknowledgement of their role in creating the conflict. When none came, I decided to be direct. I appreciate that you want to resolve things, I said carefully. But I need to know if you understand why I reacted the way I did. My father's expression tightened. We understand you felt your independence was being challenged. But family sometimes requires. It's not about what family requires, I interrupted, something I rarely dared to do with my father. It's about the fact that you made a unilateral decision about my home without consulting me. And apparently, I added, glancing at Madison, you did the same to Madison. My mother looked confused. What do you mean? Madison needed a place to stay. Madison straightened in her chair. Actually, Mom, you and Dad decided I would live with Amber before even asking if that's what I wanted. I was considering several options for coming back to Boston, but you just took over. Our parents exchanged glances, seemingly surprised by this unified front. We were trying to help, my mother insisted. Both of you. But that's the problem, I continued. Your version of help doesn't consider what we actually want or need. It's about what you think is best, and we're just expected to go along with it. My father leaned forward. We have more life experience. We can see pitfalls that you might miss. Dad, I'm 32, I reminded him. I've been living independently for over a decade. I've built a successful career, maintained my own home, and managed my own finances. I don't need to be managed like a teenager. And I'm 25, Madison added with unexpected firmness. I've made mistakes, yes. But I need to learn from them myself, not be constantly rescued and redirected. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but for once, I didn't immediately backpedal in response. We only wanted what was best for both of you, she said, echoing her statement from our confrontation at my office. I believe that you believe that, I said gently. But what's best for us isn't for you to decide anymore. We're adults. We get to determine what's best for our own lives. Even if you make mistakes, my father challenged. Especially then, I replied. Because there are mistakes to make and learn from. The conversation continued through appetizers and main courses, sometimes tense, occasionally veering toward old patterns, but always pulled back to the central issue, respect for boundaries and adult autonomy. Gradually, something remarkable began to happen. My parents started to really listen, perhaps for the first time. I never considered that our help might be holding Madison back, my mother admitted after a particularly honest exchange. We just saw her struggling and wanted to fix it. And I never realized how much pressure we've put on you, Amber, my father added, surprising me with this acknowledgement. Always expecting you to be the responsible one, the role model. Madison spoke up. I've relied on that dynamic too. It was easier to let Amber be the adult while I stayed the perpetual kid sister who needed rescuing. By the time dessert arrived, we had moved from confrontation to negotiation. The terms of our new family relationship were taking shape. Trevor would complete his 3-week sublease as agreed. My apartment would remain mine alone, not available as a landing pad for family members without explicit invitation. Madison would pursue the roommate opportunity with Diane, with me helping to facilitate the introduction, but not managing the arrangement. Our parents would contribute to Madison's security deposit instead of trying to direct her living situation, acknowledging that financial support without strings was a more appropriate way to help an adult child. Most importantly, we agreed to begin family therapy sessions to address the long-standing patterns of control, enabling, and unequal expectations that had shaped our family dynamic for decades. This isn't going to change overnight, my father cautioned as we prepared to leave, ever the pragmatist. No, I agreed. But acknowledging the problem is the first step. As we stood to go, my mother hugged me tentatively. I'm sorry, Amber. I never meant to make you feel that your boundaries didn't matter. The apology wasn't perfect, but it was sincere and more than I had expected from this meeting. Madison and I walked out together, both emotionally exhausted but cautiously optimistic. Hippopotamus, she whispered with a small smile. I laughed. We didn't need it after all. No, she agreed. I think we actually handled that like real adults. Imagine that, I replied, linking my arm through hers. 2 adult sisters making their own choices. Revolutionary. 3 months later, my apartment was mine alone again. Trevor had moved out after the agreed-upon 3 weeks, leaving the place surprisingly clean and with a thank-you gift basket featuring an assortment of local Boston treats. We developed an unexpected friendship through the ordeal, occasionally meeting for coffee to catch up. Madison was flourishing in ways that surprised us all. The roommate situation with Diane had worked out beautifully. They shared common interests in photography and hiking that had led to genuine friendship. The startup job had evolved from administrative work to a role in their social media marketing, playing to Madison's creative strengths. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, she was standing firmly on her own feet. Diane and I are thinking about getting a bigger place when our lease is up next year, she told me during one of our now weekly sister dinners. I've actually started saving for it already. That's fantastic, I said, genuinely proud of her growth. How does it feel to be making your own plans? She considered this while twirling pasta on her fork. Scary sometimes. But mostly, I don't know, empowering? I never realized how much I was limiting myself by always having the safety net of mom and dad swooping in. Our relationship had transformed too. Without the artificial roles of responsible sister and struggling sister imposed by our parents, we discovered we actually enjoyed each other's company. Madison was funnier and more insightful than I'd given her credit for, and she claimed I was less uptight than she'd always assumed. You know what's weird? Madison said. I think I resented you for years because mom and dad held you up as this perfect example. But it wasn't your fault they did that. And I resented you because they always gave you slack they never gave me, I admitted. But that wasn't your fault either. We were both just playing the roles we were assigned. The family therapy sessions had been challenging but productive. We'd had 6 sessions so far, with Dr. Levine skillfully guiding us through difficult conversations about generational patterns, unspoken expectations, and the complex dynamics that had shaped our family for decades. My parents were trying, though change didn't come easily to them. My mother still occasionally slipped into giving unsolicited advice or making assumptions about my availability, but now she caught herself more often than not. Sorry, she'd say. Old habits. What I meant to ask was, would you be interested in? My father struggled more with the process, uncomfortable with the vulnerability that therapy required. But even he had made progress, particularly in recognizing how differently he had treated his daughters. I expected perfection from you because I saw so much potential, he told me during one session. But that wasn't fair. Perfect isn't human. And I expected failure from Madison, he'd admitted in another breakthrough moment, which wasn't fair either. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. As Thanksgiving approached, I felt both anticipation and apprehension about our first major holiday since the confrontation. We had decided to gather at my parents' house, maintaining some traditions while establishing new patterns of interaction. Are you nervous? Jessica asked as I packed an overnight bag the day before Thanksgiving. I'd be staying at my parents' house for 2 nights, the first time I'd done so in years. A little, I admitted. Old patterns have a way of resurfacing during holidays. You have tools now, she reminded me. And you've practiced setting boundaries. Plus, Madison will be there as an ally. The Thanksgiving gathering was smaller than in previous years, just my immediate family rather than the extended clan. As I helped my mother in the kitchen, I noticed subtle changes in her approach. Would you mind making the green bean casserole? She asked, rather than assigning the task. But if you'd prefer to work on something else, that's fine too. Madison arrived mid-morning with a homemade pie and obvious excitement. I actually made this myself, she announced proudly. 3 practice runs at Diane's first. My father, instead of immediately retreating to watch football as had been his holiday custom, actively participated in the preparation. What can I do to help? He asked more than once, a question I couldn't remember him ever posing during family gatherings. During dinner, the conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years. My mother asked about my current marketing projects with genuine interest, not just polite obligation. My father engaged with Madison about her job without offering unsolicited career advice. When Madison mentioned she was considering taking photography classes, my mother's immediate response was telling. That sounds wonderful if it's something you're passionate about, she said, rather than questioning the practicality or suggesting alternatives as she might have done previously. Later, as we cleared the table, my mother touched my arm gently. I've been thinking about what Dr. Levine said about appreciating each other's journeys, she said. I'm proud of you, Amber. Not because you've done everything right or followed a particular path, but because you've had the courage to create a life that's authentically yours. This simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you, Mom. That means a lot. Before bed, Madison and I sat on the back porch, wrapped in blankets against the November chill, sharing a bottle of wine and conversation. Do you think it will last? She asked quietly. This new way of being family? I considered the question carefully. I think it will have ups and downs. There will be times when we all slip back into old patterns. But now we can recognize it happening and course correct. It's worth the work, Madison said decisively. I like who I am becoming without the weight of being the problem child. And I like who we are as sisters without Mom and Dad's version of us standing between us. Me too, I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. To boundaries, independence, and discovering who we really are. And to letting strangers answer doors when necessary, Madison added with a laugh. The journey hadn't been easy, and it wasn't over. True family healing is a process, not an event. But as I looked at my sister, confident and self-sufficient in ways I'd never seen before, and thought about my parents learning new ways of relating to their adult daughters, I felt profound gratitude for the difficult stand I'd taken. Sometimes, the hardest boundaries to establish are with the people we love most. And sometimes, those boundaries are exactly what love requires. As I reflect back on this challenging journey, I wonder about your experiences with family boundaries. Have you ever had to take a difficult stand to change an unhealthy dynamic? What strategies worked for you in establishing boundaries with people you care about? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about navigating complex family relationships. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries, even with family. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, healthy relationships require both love and limits.